Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Vander from Getting Smart. Welcome to Mobilizing Diverse Learners as Chief Architects of Our Future. I think we have the coolest breakout name of any on the program. Thank you for that. I think, was that your idea?
Elizabeth, that's you.
Elizabeth, yeah?
Yeah.
We have two remarkable college presidents today to talk about this subject of engaging learners, both post-secondary learners, but also high school learners in powerful learning experiences and inviting them into co-creating our future. With me are Marlene Tromp from Boise State and Philomena Mantella from Grand Valley. These are in two of my favorite cities, by the way. I spent a lot of time in Boise, and it was America's fastest growing city during the pandemic. Is it still at the top of the list?
It's in that top 3 every year.
And Grand Rapids is, for us Dutch Americans, is sort of Jerusalem, the Mecca. I pray to Grand Rapids, a couple times a day. All of my extended family is from Grand Rapids, and so I love coming back to Grand Rapids. President Mantella, one of the core things we're going to talk about is Rep 4 and what that is. Where did the idea come from? Why engage high school learners? Tell us the origin story of Rep 4 and how that's part of your agenda at Grand Valley.
Yeah, so I'm still stuck on the Dutch Jerusalem, because my favorite line there is, "If you ain't Dutch, you ain't much." So that's what I've learned since I moved. Yes. Okay. Rep 4 really was, in some ways, I give coming here a lot of credit in my early years, looking for innovation space and just being around people that want to think about the future of education and aren't afraid to challenge the conventions. And when I went to Grand Valley as the new president, I had spent the last 10 years in really a greenfield space in higher education with my former institution, opening up campuses worldwide. And so I wanted to bring a network of innovators to the network of innovators that were there, because like all cities, you find some amazing people doing incredible work. And so it grew out of a convening, and a convening that looked like this. It was maybe triple, quadruple the size room. At every table there was a high school learner, a diverse high school learner background, all first gen. And they were without a doubt the strongest voices in the room. And the faculty, the staff stopped and listened very carefully as they talked about their lived experience and the potential for the future. So we came up with a proof of concept around, what if we do 3 things? Rep 4 has a concept. It's trying to achieve 3 things as the student goes through an experience together. And that is that they can get agency for their own learning, that they become the architect, we become the support. The second thing is that they really get a sense of the possible self, that they see far beyond perhaps where they were setting parameters for their self. And third, they see the invisible curriculum of getting through the morass we call college and university. And we decided that the work they would do when they came in for an experience would be around educational reform. Like, what were they nervous about? That we weren't going to serve them well. So Rep 4, which stands for Rapid Educational Prototyping, was students coming in, having a design thinking, immersive experience that helps to do those 3 things, and they work on an educational problem. And they surface that as an ideation, and then we, with 7 other institutions who are founders of Rep 4, Marlene was one of the first at Boise, we commit to take these prototypes, these ideations, and move them into action. And after we did the proof of concept, I knew right away that this was not a journey we could take alone, that if we were going to scale this, if we were going to accelerate our learning, if we were going to evaluate it, we needed other innovators to support the work. And so I went looking and found educational institutions that were very different. That was another thing. We wanted to see how change would stick in our environments, and we wanted those environments to be different. So we have an HBCU, we have a community college, we have a system, we have a regional, we have a R1, and we all anchor different parts of the country.
Where did the design thinking aspect emerge at Grand Valley?
We really, the design thinking is, we had a design thinking institute at Grand Valley.
Right.
One of our, in fact, we'll be giving him an honorary degree this year, but the former, Jim Hackett, the former CEO, is a community resident of Ford Motor Company and of Steelcase. He was a real advocate. So at this convening, we had voices for design thinking that was happening in the community all over.
So Grand Rapids is really this interesting, vibrant economy. It's sort of the furniture capital of America. And there's a lot of advanced manufacturing in Western Michigan for the automotive industry. And so on many different fronts, it's really a design hub. And Grand Valley has really emerged as a vibrant part of this ecosystem. One of my first indications of that was visiting the public museum school. Grand Rapids has this very cool middle school in a science museum, and they have a high school in a former art museum, and both of them are grounded in design thinking, and that happened because of Grand Valley State. And your faculty, I think a bunch of them were out on a run one morning and they dreamed up the idea, wouldn't it be cool if there was a school in this museum? And so anyway, that was another aspect of design thinking. So it's sort of in the water at Grand Valley. But I want to push on the why engage high school learners, because that's such an interesting and important leap.
Yeah.
And where did the impetus for that come from? And was it really a sneaky way to get your faculty doing innovative stuff, but sort of outside the university, but university related? Like, what was behind that?
Yeah, all of the above was behind that. It really was.
Because it's really a cool change strategy.
Yeah. So
and it's a enrollment strategy, right? It's to attract diverse learners to learn about Grand Valley. It's all of those things, right?
Yeah, I think when we work with our own students, if we acknowledge that public education is leaving behind far too many students, then we're working with a subset that have made it in. And so what we really wanted to do is to reach to the students that are not successfully making the transition. And we wanted to test the hypothesis that if we empowered them more directly, if we gave them design thinking skills, if we gave them agency, if they understood education could change based on their voice, that they would be part of it. So yes, part of the strategy was it's the middle, the Rep 4, one of the 4 items is equity, was to really reach in and support students from diverse backgrounds, underserved learners. And yes, at Grand Valley in particular, I will speak for my institution, but I think a lot of institutions are like this. The faculty, they're in this work because they care about students. And so they listen carefully to students. And if students can articulate their concerns, their deepest fears, what they really need in order for education to work from them, I find it resonates. And so it was a change management strategy, for sure.
Have you seen the faculty bring any of those strategies into the college itself, into the university itself?
Absolutely. The more and more faculty we have engaged with this, the more we have seen, and all of the institutions do something a little different. So one of the strategies at Shippensburg University, which is one of the universities that are working with us, really focused on making it a part of their faculty teaching, learning, development, is so that these students that were in this summer institute would come in and would really have a, flip the model. They would offer a lecture in terms of what they'd learned and what was important to them, and it just resonated. It really resonated with the faculty.
All right, off to Boise. President Trump, when did you hear about Rep 4? What was interesting about it? How did you adapt it to Boise?
So Philly gave me a call, and she's very humble about the way in which she's masterminded this entire project, but she really has been the prime mover. But, I just came from ACE, American Council on Education, where I heard hundreds of people saying over and over and over again, gosh, how do we get these kids to college? Nobody is asking them. And that's a big part of what this does, is it doesn't just say, why aren't you coming? It says, what would make you want to come? If we made it different somehow, what would it look like for you to be there? What would it need to be for you to be there? How do we need to change? And that's just a different way of framing the conversation. And we're looking at that diversity because, as Philly said, there are a lot of people who are going to find that pathway more easily. But we wanted to see with those first-gen, underrepresented, low socioeconomic status, rural students, what their experience needed to be in order for them to be lit up by the idea of coming to college, to make it feel like it was theirs, to make it feel like they could own it. And so for me, as a first-gen student, I grew up in Wyoming. And when I went to university, I really had only heard of 3 universities ever. And when I went to university, the first week, I didn't sleep at all because it was so loud. And when you grow up in a small town in Wyoming, and literally the only thing I ever heard at night my whole life was coyotes. And suddenly there's all this street noise and there's people, and it was so loud and so overwhelming, and it took everything I had not to drop out. And I just don't think we're asking the questions of people in all these different diverse communities. I don't think we're asking the students who typically don't go, what does it need to be for you? So when Philly called me, she sent me this prospectus, and I was like, that's so cool. And then she called me on the phone and said, but what do you think? And I said, I think it could be game-changing to start to ask students, what would it look like if we built the bridge with you? How would it change everything? And I'll tell you that the most exciting thing for me, the very first time that we did a national convening, so this is when we had students at all these institutions all over the country, working, collaborating, and actually competing in the most positive way to generate ideas that each institution would pilot. When we did that first national convening, and I'm in Idaho, one of the states that was right at the tip of the spear of a lot of the changes about, like, what are you doing for students? How are you doing that stuff for students? And there are some things we no longer want you to do. But what we heard from these students so much was, I need community in order to survive there. If I'm going to come there, I need community. And that's not something we didn't know, but the way we were talking about it looked really different from the way that they were talking about it. And so for me, the excitement and the concept was Philly reached out to me, and I was like, oh, wow, that could really change the way we do business. And so I think we wanted to find institutions that were interested in changing the way they do business.
How many institutions are involved now?
7.
And so what does engagement look like in Boise? What specifically do you do? Is it juniors and seniors? And is it summer? Is it during the school year? What does it look like?
We have a couple of ways that we approach it. So design thinking is one approach. Ours uses project-based learning because we have a program that goes out into rural communities with Apple Corporation that brings to rural communities iPads and invites them to be engaged in STEM, so that we're getting a lot of underrepresented students who typically don't come to college engaged in STEM, and they do project-based learning. So we brought them together and asked them to do project-based thinking and to tell us what it would look like for that to make a college education. And it's an interesting question because at that point, most of their experience of college is whatever they've seen on TV or in the movies. It's not firsthand experience. So they're not coming with a sense already of what that means. So their sensibility about what's possible is so open. But then we also created a supplemental structure to that, which had students who'd been through the program and then come to college, who were mentors for the students who were the high school students that were in the program. And that was creating these layers that were really exciting too. So for us, what it looks like is this project-based learning, and we reach out across the state to all these rural communities, and a lot of them are children of farm workers, their parents don't speak English, no one in their family's ever gone to college, and we're saying, you help us build that bridge and we'll make it.
How is it the same or different in Grand Rapids? Is most of your outreach local, or is it some of it more widespread?
Yeah, we offer the program in both Grand Rapids, Detroit, and virtually. So we have kind of 3 different domains. It's pretty much all over the state. We had some from out of state. You know, we had some that anchored. We're the Midwest anchor, so we are trying to draw a larger group. And it's there's like 4 dimensions of what Rep 4 is. The first is this Summer Institute, but really it's the elevation of these ideas and the strengthening of student voice. And so you can apply that in the summer, you could apply it in the school year, you could apply it, you know, we're beginning that work in the summer with high schoolers, but think of it broader than that, because that's the construct. The second is to elevate what they've done. And that's the national convening that Marlene mentioned, which is for students, undergraduates. So now these high schoolers create these constructs, and the undergraduates upvote the ones they think we should work on. So they still are in charge. We're flipping the model. They're still telling us where we need to go in order to improve our educational offerings. And a lot of these came, they're really the supports necessary to be present. And I mean fully present, you know, to be able to do the work, not concerns about the ability to do the work. It's removing the distractions or getting the supports. So that's the second is the national convening. The third is this concept of really prototyping them. And then the fourth is a commitment that we've all made to share anything we build as a public good. So that rather than looking to monetize some of what we could do, the objective is to reach more learners. The objective is to accelerate. These are, you know, sometimes I sit in these sessions and I think to myself, it's not that we don't know what to do, it's that we don't know how to do it in these systems that are very ingrained and institutionalized. We've got to help each other with the how. And so that's the fourth component of Rep 4.
Are any of the other members in the network, do they all use this rapid prototyping sort of agile methodology? Is that a core part of the commitment?
Yeah, a core part of the commitment is that we actually lay out all of the ideations in any one year, and then we look at what we want to work on either independently or collectively.
It's such a cool part of the program, but it's really a new and different way to think about delivery, right? Was that something that was new in Boise, or were there probably pockets of design thinking and pockets of rapid prototyping, but is that new to the culture?
We have a College of Innovation and Design, and we were, I think one of the advantages, I went to Boise State from the University of California system. I was the provost at UC Santa Cruz, and the UC is the greatest public university system in the world. But often when you ask a question at the UC, people will say, oh, is Davis doing that? Is Irvine doing that? Did Berkeley do that? How to work at Berkeley? You know, I mean, it's so much about like everybody's sort of staying with each other and marching on that path together. And what was exciting to me at Boise State was that I would say something, and instead of people saying, well, is somebody else doing that? They would say, oh, cool, would that work better for students? We'll try that. And that felt exciting to me. So there was a lot of openness to that. And with the College of Innovation and Design, we were doing a lot of rapid prototyping already. Yeah. We have a program called GIM, Games, Interactive Media, and Mobile, that I think is just stellar. It teaches, it's a cross between engineering, social sciences, and the arts, and they do mobile design for big concepts. So they've been working with the Holocaust Museum to do an interactive display where you can carry an iPad around and do a virtual reality experience to understand propaganda. They built an app for campus that anytime there was leftover food at some kind of session, like an event with faculty, it was called Bronco Beam. It would send out notification to all students who were within a certain distance of that building so they could come get whatever the leftover food was so it didn't get in their own way. Because we have most campuses, we have a problem with hunger and homelessness. If you're serving those first generation students, that's going to be an issue. And so we've done a lot of that, but we've really tried to take the thinking that's come out of these Rep 4 experiences in a lot of directions. I'll give you a specific example. Mary Daly, the chair of the San Francisco Federal Reserve, Idaho is in her region, so she toured the state. And when she toured the state, she asked kids, why aren't you going to college? And the most common answer she heard was, because I got to buy a pickup. To live in Idaho, I got to buy a pickup, and a pickup's expensive. And if I have to buy a pickup, I can't afford to go to college. So we actually translated the metric of the cost of an education at Boise State University into pickup trucks. So now when we travel around the state, we explain to people that 45% of Boise State students graduate from Boise State after 4 years with $0 in student loan debt. And of the 55% that do have debt, it's 1/3 the price of a pickup truck for all 4 years. Because that helps, what we've learned from the Rep 4 experience is we need for our students to tell us what they need. And it's not just, now you're here, what program do you want us to build for you? It's how do we look different organizationally? And so we're changing all of our outgoing language too, based on what we're hearing from them.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that because they fundamentally designed something different than you had ever thought of. Like we're prototyping right now the financial literacy app that they talked about, and this won't surprise any of you who work with first-gen learners. They'll be overwhelmed by the relationship with money, right? They don't know what that looks like, and they don't know how to think about it. But what they design and what we would design is so dramatically different. So they created personas, and those personas were animals and tarot cards. And to describe, they take a test and they describe and they end up with this persona or this blend of persona, and then they go on this journey, and we wouldn't think of it that way. We're trying to aggregate the content and make it more usable and put it up, and and it's just the fundamental way they think about it to be truly relatable is different. We're just too distant from it.
I want to try to frame a big question. If we zoom out, I think we're, 12 or 24 months into something new. America's relationship with higher education changed a lot during the pandemic. People stopped enrolling in higher education. We saw a couple million learners sit out. We're facing a demographic cliff with fewer high school learners heading to college. If you look at the recent poll data, the college aspirations flipped from being majority to, in many communities, minority aspirations of kids that want to go on to college. Big questions about the student loan crisis. Of a lot of people like me have been pushing kids into college without a sense of direction. A lot of them left without a degree and with debt. And so you have this new worst case scenario. All of that to indicate it feels like we're in a new space where it's time to craft a new sort of bargain with our communities. And it feels like rapid prototyping and mobilizing diverse learners are two aspects of recrafting the future of higher education. I don't know what the question is in there. Is that right? Does it feel like we're in a new space? And is this the kernel of the new solution for the future of higher ed?
Well, I would have dropped the mic right then. That sounded like absolutely. That's the big picture we're looking for, really. You know, it was interesting. Some of us were at the Chronicles session. Was anybody at the Chronicles session? All right. Well, then no matter what I say, you'll believe me. And Goldie was identifying a number of trends, and top 10 trends. It's been written up in the Chronicle piece. And then she was starting to riff a little bit on other things she was experiencing. And she looked at the crowd and she said, how many, it seems like the world's changing. She said what Tom just said, and she iterated. And then she said, how many of you are doing something new and different with how you're getting information from students? Right. Silence. Silence, all of us. Silence. That's what we're doing. We're saying maybe we don't have the answers, maybe they have the answers. And let's empower them. Let's support them. Let's look through their fresh eyes at what we're doing and who we are. And let's be vulnerable in that space and start to reimagine together. So, I hope that it starts to bring us answers that we wouldn't have found on our own. I think it has the potential to. I really do. It's amazing when you work with these young people in this way. But Marlene, I would invite you to jump in too.
Well, I think I want to underscore a couple things that you're saying, which is that we think we're doing this because they show up on our campuses and we ask them these questions. But I think a point Philly made earlier is really critical here, which is there are a lot of young people that aren't showing up on our campuses. So we're not asking them. If we wait until they get there, then those are already the students who figured out a way to make it on that path. We've got to ask the young people who are in these groups that have historically not come, and I think another group we have to talk to. And for me, really this model is a way of rethinking all of these actions that we take. So those some college no degree people who are out there carrying all that student debt, how do we get them back so they can finish that credential? And how do we support that? But I don't think we can answer that question meaningfully if we don't ask them. So we have to find, and that's what's so, to my way of thinking, so striking about this concept is we think we're asking. And I think what Philly is pointing at here is we're not. We're not asking the people who don't come. And that's what we're all trying to do, is figure out a different way to get to the question with young people who have historically not come. And now I want to ask that question for those returning students, for the veterans, for the parenting students. So we asked young single parents, how do we change education for you? And they said, could you just put a room in the library where I can bring my kid and have access to the library and study, but the kids can just play? So we actually took a bunch of stacks out of a huge part of the library, cleared it out, put them in an off-site storage space, and now we've got this giant room that's giant, it's probably twice as big as this, but where mothers can come and study, or fathers can come and study with their kids, and the kids are all playing, and it's all soft, engaging stuff, but it's changing what's possible for them as parents in school. And I think we've got to think differently about how we get at the voices of people who aren't accessing education, not waiting until they show up on our campus and asking the question.
So it feels like, tell me if you hear this from young people, that they're looking for a different financial bargain and a different engagement bargain. And if so, is that starting to change on your campus? Because for a lot of young people, their freshman year is a series of pretty bad learner experiences, right? Where you go into a lecture hall and maybe you have some contact with a TA. You probably don't get to meet senior faculty until maybe your third year. Is it starting to change the core engagements at Grand Valley?
Yeah, I think I would just add to a couple of the things. They're also looking to be seen for their assets, seen for their promise, seen for what they can bring to the institution. And they're looking for help in limiting the distractions. So all of what you said is true. And I think in all of those areas, so some of that touches the way in which we evaluate and support and allow students to navigate us. Some of that is the core educational experience. Now, Grand Valley has like no classes over 25. It's really a teaching institution. It's small. One of the things that quite frankly drew me to the institution, it was palpable, is that faculty were interested in the whole student. They, in fact, if you started to take them out of the experience of supporting the whole student, that's when they would get nervous because they didn't know how to do their work without supporting the whole student. And so, so we're more inclined in that direction, but that doesn't mean it works for the folks that we're missing. It doesn't mean it's still, it's still kind of a supply chain model. It still doesn't have enough on and off ramps. It still isn't personalized enough. It still doesn't put the student in the center enough. So we just keep finding ways, and you know what else? When sometimes you're pushing the rock up the hill, it's sort of the reverse of what Marlene said with the UC system. People want people with them. I can say, well, I'm leading a alliance in which 7 other institutions and 200,000 learners are all engaged in this work, and they say, oh, well, that must be important. That must be important work. So it works as a change strategy as well because people will listen more when there's more institutions sort of hovering around the issues.
I think the one thing I want to add, and I think this is something Philly said earlier too that I think is important, and Tom, you were asking about this. I think having the different kinds of institutions matters because we have locations. One of the things Michael Crow always says is you've got to leverage place. We have locations where we sit, and most students go to school within a 50-mile radius of where they live. Not everybody. But especially when we're talking about these students that are being served by big public institutions, almost all of them are going to be at some level place-bound or they're going to stay close. So I think having different kinds of institutions means we're always thinking, what's different about the students we have to serve right here? So 82% of Idaho is rural. So I have to constantly think about rural students. Every state has rural populations, but a huge portion of my state, basically I live in the only part of my state that's not rural. Boise is the only part of the state that is not rural.
Well, it's also the only part of the state that's blue, right?
That's right.
You live in a red state in a sort of a blue bubble.
Yes.
How does that play into the
It's not a
crafting?
bubble for me. I can tell you that.
How does that influence the new bargain that you're trying to craft around higher education?
I think actually, Tom, that points to one of the big questions that we're seeing right now. So half the country is going through this crisis where there are these enormous political attacks on higher education, and there's attempts to control curriculum, and there's assaults on our faculty, on our principals, on the work that we're doing. And I think if we just sort of tip our head to the side and think we don't have to deal with that, I think that is a sadly mistaken strategy because we cannot leave half the country behind in the work that we're doing or we won't make any kind of lasting change. And so we've got to figure out how to talk across those landscapes. And so I have to present before the legislature, and I've actually had my presentations to the legislature featured in the New York Times as examples of McCarthyism. It's not easy, but I will tell you that when the students speak to tell us what they want and need, it changes the way our legislators hear it because it's a different kind of argument than the one that we've always made, which is we know. When we're asking students what they think, as Philly said, we're not saying we know the answer. to what's going to make their education better. We're asking them, help us help you have a better experience. And that changes the way I think in a red state, those answers get heard when we say, this is what our students tell us. It doesn't completely diffuse that, right? Because they think, there's a lot of people who think that it's because I have put them through my magical indoctrination machine that they think that. But it does change it when students are saying, here's what I need to be successful, and here's what I want from my university. It changes things.
How does that playing out in Michigan for you? Is it?
We're purple.
Yeah.
We have lots of colors. Yeah, it absolutely, you know, if you can elevate their voice as a part of what we're doing, and quite frankly, they describe the need of, you said community, the need of belonging, the need of being able to manage it within their finances, which can resonate with a state-supported institution that isn't getting a whole lot of state support. You know, so they become a part of the advocacy platform for us, but in their own way. And they get skillful at it. And they, you know, young people have always been game changers. I think what we're doing is we're constantly trying to flex our educational system as the experts, rather than acknowledge that it's going to take a long time for the system to flex. So if they're elevating their voice and we're listening to every little component, those changes are going to aggregate to big changes pretty quickly.
I hate to bring this up with a couple minutes left, but rapid prototyping, well, first of all, it does feel like the idea of engaging learners and rapid prototyping are almost unassailable messages politically. So I do think that's positive, and reaching out to K-12 has to be a very popular idea as well. Is there a technology component to this that can help break the cost curve? Short answer to that is rapid prototyping and learner engagement technology assisted? Can that be part of the solution?
Yes, and I'll just give a specific example. One of the things that we did is we found that students were, when they were dropping out, if we could figure out a way to give them a faculty mentor, and then they took a bunch of classes that were online at a very low cost, that if we could reduce their cost for a year and give them a chance to work with a faculty mentor, so they were getting that support and mentoring, they were more likely to stay in school and figure out their path. So we're trying new things that allow them to have that flexibility.
Yeah, I would just say we're at a point, so we are now, we started this in 2019 with the proof of concept, brought on the other schools, and have been working together over the last, this will be our third summer together as an alliance. And we're to the point now that we could see a direct-to-learner strategy, where we could see, you know, expanding the group to a number of other institutions. So we're looking for our model to scale, and that can't be without a technology platform partner.
Where can people that want to learn more about Rep 4, where can they go to find out more?
Yeah, there's, put up your hands if you're from one of the Rep 4 institutions, including Mary Papazian, who was a founding president at San Jose. Jesse, I think there's a lot of players here. You know, rep4.org is the organization. Please look at what the students have created so far. And if you're interested, you know, just reach out to one of us, or, you know, put your name on the website and we'll catch you.
Well, we just think this is a super promising direction. We love the fact that you and your partner institutions are reaching out to K-12, engaging diverse learners. I love the aspect of design thinking and rapid prototyping. It's not only a super impressive engagement and enrollment strategy, as you said at the very outset, I think it's a sneaky chain strategy of engaging the faculty in really building the future together along with your future learners. So it's a very cool strategy. Thanks for joining us today for the conversation. Join me in thanking our two innovating college presidents.